Welcome to the Brian Craig Show podcast. This is where MAGA comes to talk. Welcome one and all. Boy, Marco Rubio, was he not impressive in Munich? Now, last year, JD Vance went to the Munich conference and turned the world upside down. But I got to tell you, Marco Rubio's speech at the Munich conference was the greatest speech I have ever heard any public official or politician give, except, of course, for our favorite president, Donald Trump. And watching Marco Rubio's speech there, which I am going to go through in its entirety on this podcast, it's that good. It got me thinking this, okay? The biggest problem we have in the MAGA movement is we've got too many great people to be future presidents, right? JD Vance, Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, right? Scott Bessent, man, I like him. He could be the first openly gay president. I say openly gay because maybe one of the other ones was and we didn't know. I don't know. There was one, which was the president who wasn't married? There was one president who wasn't married. Just forgot his name. But Marco Rubio is spectacular. JD Vance, of course, is viewed as the heir because he's the vice president. And Marco Rubio and JD Vance are best friends. In fact, JD Vance said that Marco Rubio is going to be the godfather of the baby that they're having. And Marco Rubio said a month or so ago that if JD Vance runs for president, he will not run. And the speech that Marco Rubio gave was so good. They're both great, okay? Don't misunderstand what I'm about to say here, okay? I love them both. And if JD Vance runs and gets the nomination, I'm going to support him every second of every day to get him elected president and everything. And I know you all will too. But if I had to choose between Marco Rubio and JD Vance to be the second MAGA president, it'd be Marco Rubio. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. This speech today was spectacular. That's one of the reasons. And I do have some biases towards Marco Rubio. He's a Floridian. I'm a Floridian. We're the same age, exactly, both Generation X. I don't like the idea of Gen X getting skipped over for millennial. But, those are just, not the main reasons are, I think that he is perfect to be the president. They both have great qualities. Don't misunderstand me. They both have great qualities. And I know you all agree too. Picking who you would rather be the second MAGA president between Marco Rubio and JD Vance is like asking a parent of multiple children to pick their favorite child. But even though parents, I only have one child, so that's an easy thing for me. But most parents I know, everybody knows that when they have multiple kids, they have a favorite child. They just don't voice it. They let it be known in other ways, right? So I think that most MAGA people would say that if I had to choose between JD Vance and Marco Rubio, that I'd rather Marco Rubio be the top of the ticket. JD Vance could be vice president again. He could be vice president for 8 more years with Marco Rubio. You do know that, right? There's not a term limit on the vice presidents. So he could come back and be vice president again. Or maybe he could be Secretary of State for Marco Rubio. Or maybe JD Vance could take over Turning Point USA. Or maybe JD Vance could make Marco Rubio his vice president, or Marco Rubio could stay on as Secretary of State with JD Vance. I know there's many different combinations of possibilities, but I've just been so impressed by Marco Rubio this entire second term, and I kind of feel in a way that we've seen Marco Rubio grow up. Like some of you out there have been listening to me all these years since I was like a teenager. I kind of feel that way with Marco Rubio because I remember when Marco Rubio was in the state government here in Tallahassee, and he was all over the news in Florida a lot, and then, of course, he became our senator. But what he's done in the last year has been absolutely amazing. I believe that Marco Rubio, and this is without question, I don't even think is up for debate, he is the greatest Secretary of State that the United States has ever had. You look at the things he's done, as Secretary of State. You know, he was the perfect pick to be Secretary of State because of the border issue and the problems that we've had with the drug trafficking and the southern border and everything else. Marco Rubio, his parents are Cuban immigrants. You know, he was born in Miami. But he speaks Spanish at home, I'm sure, with his wife and kids. And he knows a lot of these people in Latin America, the leadership, before he was even Secretary of State. And the southern border issue being such a big issue for this country, the perfect person to fix it was Marco Rubio. But he's done all these other things, right? I mean, there's this meme of all the jobs he has because President Trump has him running everything. You know, remember, it started with USAID. He took that over. He's running Venezuela now. He's basically the president of Venezuela, you know, the way things are going right now since Maduro was removed. And he just did a wonderful job. Now, my original plan for the podcast here was to go through the highlights of Marco Rubio's speech. And what I realized when I was doing that, as I was looking through the highlights, it was basically the whole speech because it's only 21 minutes long. And so I'm like, well, why don't I just go through the whole thing and we could stop down and talk about it as we go? Because pulling out the sound bites, it just, you know, it seemed to be a waste of effort, really. When I added up all the different clips, it was pretty much the whole speech. So I figured I would just go through the whole thing and we'll break it down. Now, I do have some other things I'm going to cover after this, and you're welcome to share your thoughts if you'd like to call in about Marco Rubio. You're certainly welcome to do that. You're listening to the Brian Craig Show podcast, which is available wherever you get podcasts. If there's a podcast platform, I'm on it. Just search for the Brian Craig Show. If you want to catch the show in video form and live, where you hear me taking live calls, that's on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for the Brian Craig Show, and I'll come up. All right, so let's go. This is Marco Rubio's speech at the Munich Security Conference.
We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Mm-hmm. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike, we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe, one with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. The time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain.
Yeah, you know, the thing about this, look, they're hanging on his every word. Complete opposite of AOC when she was asked about Taiwan at Munich. You know, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking what I'm about to share with you, and maybe you've already said it. I just haven't heard them yet. But this is the first time I've seen any hope for Europe, right? Because we look at everything that's been going on with Ukraine and Russia, which seems like there's no end in sight, and it seems like the rest of Europe are trying to get a war going as opposed to trying to stop the Ukraine-Russian war. And I think most Americans have had kind of this attitude that let Europe do themselves in. They're so self-destructive. Let's just let them, they're doomed. Let's let them continue the dooming themselves, right? But this speech of Marco Rubio's in Munich is the first time in a long time, maybe ever, that I've said, well, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we could turn Europe around, right?
But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocks were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole. That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it, an evil empire.
See, this thing, this is a common theme in this speech. He talks about civilization, a civilization, and he mentions it later and everything, because we're all the same civilization, Western civilization. The United States was settled and founded by Europeans, so we have a shared civilization. Most Americans are descendant of some European nation. So, he's actually saying, hey, the United States and Europe, we've got one civilization to save here. And we've done it before. We can do it again. It's pretty presidential speech. It's really, if JD Vance was not vice president, you would look at this and say, he just announced he's running for president. If he was still in the Senate, Marco Rubio, that's what, he just announced he's running for president with this speech. That's what people would be saying.
And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own.
Mainly he's talking about China here, and I know a lot of people will say, like I saw somebody in the live chat said, oh, Gang of Eight, and things like this. President Trump used to be a Democrat. Ronald Reagan used to be a Democrat. People change. And Marco Rubio's been out there for a long time. Remember when he gave the response to one of the Obama State of the Unions and he had that problem with his mouth getting dry because he was nervous and he stopped and had the drink of water. It was very awkward. He's been in the public eye like his whole adult life. So, yeah, you can go back and cherry pick. But you're going to hold people accountable for a little thing here, a little thing there that happened when they were young men? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe.
It's amazing. I mean, bringing the alliance back together. It's really something else. And it shows you that this great movement that President Trump began, the MAGA movement, has multi-generational legs to it. You know, what the never-Trumpers think and the Democrats think is that after President Trump leaves the White House, that's it, that the movement's going to fade away, like the Tea Party did. All right, that's why they killed Charlie Kirk, because they thought if Charlie Kirk wasn't around, that, you know, the MAGA movement, it would be a big blow to the MAGA. It has hurt. There's no doubt about it. A lot of chaos has been caused by that. But you can see here with Marco Rubio that the MAGA movement, it's not going anywhere. In fact, it's now the mainstream. We've taken over.
For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization.
Okay.
We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours.
Okay, now the camera, you know, because if you're watching it on YouTube, you're seeing the video version of this. You know, if you're as opposed to just listening on the audio podcast platforms. But this Munich conference is done by Europeans, and they keep doing these zoom ins and close ups of people in the audience that are watching. You and I don't know who they are, right? But they're important European politicians. Maybe they're a prime minister or a foreign minister, you know, a prime minister, foreign minister, this person. That. They're people that the Europeans know. They're important people in Europe. I don't know who they are either. We don't recognize these people. But no matter who they put the cameras on in the audience at the Munich conference, they're hanging on Marco Rubio's every word. See, Marco Rubio is giving the European leaders hope in a future that I don't think they've had in a long time.
Because we know.
Hear this? Wow.
Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions. They are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Mm-hmm. Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
See, what a smart thing he's doing here. You see what he's doing? It's very sophisticated politicking. All the compliments he's giving to them. And he's, you know, what the left have done, and they've been very successful, and they've been successful all over. They've been most successful in Europe than here. But, you know, you could tell when AOC was being questioned by liberal reporters, they have convinced, the left have convinced Europe to be ashamed of themselves, of their heritage, of their culture, of their civilization. And what Marco Rubio is saying, hey, don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed. And he's listing all these great things they've done. And it's also, it shows you that with President Trump in this second term, there's been a big change on the whole planet. America's back as the leader of the free world. And what's been going on for, I don't know how many decades, really, the world's been in chaos because the United States, you know, with the presidents we've had, other than Donald Trump, since, you know, all of them since Reagan left office, have been corrupt public officials. And there's been no leadership, not just in this country, but in the world. And that's why everything's been falling apart.
And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable.
Wow. Yeah.
It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West.
See, now that here in this country, we've shut down the southern border illegal immigration, right? 9 months, there has not been a single illegal crossing. Maybe 10 months at this point, but at least 9 months, there's not been a single illegal crossing from the southern border, right? And plus what's happened with the drug cartels being taken down and such. Remember, the drugs coming in by sea are down almost 100%, like over 95% cut off. And now that we've done that, what Marco Rubio is saying, hey, you guys in Europe, we did it at the southern border. You can do it here too. And this thing, it's interesting, he used this term, deindustrialization. Here he is in the place where the Industrial Revolution happened, and they've been deindustrializing because China has been buying off public officials for decades with the global warming scam. Because while the United States and Europe have been deindustrializing, China has been industrializing, and don't go buy any of this stuff.
Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia, it is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself.
See, now, and Marco Rubio, he comes at this from a very, very credible viewpoint since he is the child of legal immigrants. Donald Trump's a first-generation American, too. His mother's from Scotland, but, people don't want to recognize that. But Marco Rubio's parents are both from Cuba. He's a first-generation American. So when he talks about legal immigration, he brings a lot of credibility to the table.
And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice.
Wow, pretty powerful stuff. All right, listen, I'm going to take our first break. When we get back, I'm going to jump back into Marco Rubio. But if you're watching live, feel free to give me a call. The number is toll-free and pinned in the live chat. The Brian Craig Show podcast is available wherever you get podcasts. If there's a podcast platform, just go to it and search for The Brian Craig Show. I'll come right up. If you want to catch the show live in video form, that's on YouTube. Just search The Brian Craig Show on YouTube. If you'd like to call in and you're watching live, the number's toll-free, 888-465-2631. Your thoughts on Marco Rubio certainly are welcome. And if you had to pick one, who would you pick to be the second MAGA president, the successor to Donald Trump? JD Vance or Marco Rubio? All right, 888-465-2631, 888-465-2631. Don't go anywhere. We'll take a quick break. When we get back, I'll finish up with Marco Rubio. I got a lot more to cover, and your calls. Don't go anywhere. What if the most powerful city in the world doesn't rely on politics or wars, but on its image? The Shella City novel series invites you into a parallel universe where fashion, luxury brands, and radical freedom shape a glittering utopia unlike anything you've seen before. A neutral city, no racism or homophobia. Genders are just fashion terms, and no one there has a defined ethnicity or even a last name. A liberated economy and innovation without limits. At the center stands Domania, the modeling empire, and its enigmatic CEO, Randall, who helped transform Shella into the city of beauty and elegance, launching it into a golden age of wealth and global influence. But in a world built on perfection and glamour, what could hide beneath? In this story, you'll find the models of Domania living their daily strive of image and compete internally, or attend the secret events held by Domania. If you're following today's news, you can guess what they're about. In every page of this story, ambition collides with loyalty. A war happens in Shella, but without weapons. It's literally called the Elegance War. Will Shella remain stable, or will the illusion begin to fracture? Find out when you read Shella City, available now on Amazon in Kindle and paperback, and free with Kindle Unlimited. Enter the city, decide what you believe. If you like fashion and reading fantasy, don't miss this. It's a story where first world problems become so catastrophic. Looking for more patients? ProvidersNook.com helps healthcare professionals get discovered. ProvidersNook.com's easy-to-use directory connects local patients with doctors, therapists, and clinics, so your practice stands out when it matters most. ProvidersNook.com makes healthcare easier to find. Patients quickly discover trusted providers nearby, and healthcare professionals gain more exposure, more bookings, and more growth, all in one powerful directory. Best of all, it's very affordable. Go right now to ProvidersNook.com. That's ProvidersNook.com, your premier healthcare provider directory. ProvidersNook.com. What if we've been asking the wrong questions about aliens all along? When people talk about non-human intelligence, they look to the skies, to UAPs, to massive craft and towering beings. But what if some of them have been here the entire time, much smaller and hiding in plain sight? In When the Fae Came, available online at Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, and Amazon, author Martin Thomas explores a provocative idea that the beings we've called fairies, elves, dwarfs, and goblins may not be myth at all, but advanced non-human intelligences. Drawing from global sightings and early research, When the Fae Came connects underground and underwater colonies across places like Mexico, Canada, Malaysia, and Europe. Beings capable of invisibility, flight, and telepathic communication. This isn't fantasy, it's an investigation into how ancient stories may be misunderstood encounters with something real. If you're curious about where folklore ends and non-human intelligence begins, When the Fae Came asks questions most researchers avoid. Order your copy of When the Fae Came from author Martin Thomas online at Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, and Amazon. All right, we're back. I'm Brian. Thanks for tuning in. All right, back to Marco Rubio. This is Marco Rubio at the Munich Conference, just hitting home run after home run.
In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world, and we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins.
That's right.
Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations.
See that? Wow. See, and this comes after, all the tariff wars that were going on, right? We had to shake, President Trump shook things up quite a bit with Marco Rubio to clean house a little bit and get the trade agreements equalized. And he's letting them know, hey, listen, we took care of that, but, we're still allies. And every time they show these European leaders in the crowd, they're hanging on his every word. There's no boredom. There's no annoyance. They're very serious, and they're eating up what he's saying.
An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
Wow. Hear that? This is what they want to hear.
Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain. And our largest and most iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of two devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields, from Kapyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends.
There's even a lot of military from Europe in there, and they're applauding too. They're eating this up. There's one woman they keep showing. I hope she gets identified so we know what country she's from. I'm curious. There's one woman who's a blonde woman. They keep showing her, and she's not applauding, and she's not happy. I don't know who she is, but she's somebody important because they keep going to her, and she does not like Marco Rubio.
We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable, and our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, that is amazing. Is that not a president right there? Yeah. So the question I asked at the beginning of this, we love JD Vance, so come on, we all know we love all these people. Who, if you could pick one, JD or Marco, who would you want to be the second MAGA president? Now, if JD gets it, I'm going to vote for him. I'm going to support him. I'm going to advocate for him. I'm going to campaign for him. I'm going to be talking about him on this program every day, promoting him. But if I had to make my pick, it'd be Marco Rubio. Not just because of this speech. The speech is just the final cherry on top of a year of just incredible work. If you're on hold, stand by. If you'd like to call in, the number's toll-free no matter where you're listening. If you're tuned in live, 888-465-2631. 888-465-2631. 2631. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back with much more after this. On the line, we have Gina. She's a client of Jupiter Joe Thomas. Gina, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, thanks. So you went and met with Joe Thomas about annuities. Can you tell me about your experience?
I can't say enough good things about my experience with Joe Thomas. He's a straight shooter. He tells it like it is. He talks in plain language so that you know, because I didn't know anything about this stuff when I retired. So I walked into his office, and immediately I felt comfortable. And I said, look, I know nothing about this. I don't want to lose my shirt. So please guide me in the right direction so that I'll be set. And he sure did. And I'm very happy that I went there. And I even got my mother to join, too. Now I feel comfortable that I'm set, and I don't have to worry about running out of money.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than running out of money before you run out of life, right?
Exactly.
Give Jupiter Joe Thomas a call and schedule your no-charge consultation. His number is 561-743-0999. 561-743-0999 and online, jupiterjoe.com. All right, Gina, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
For the first time ever, we're bringing you My Pillow mattresses and mattress toppers for as low as $99.98. Remember, sleep's all about temperature and pressure points. Whatever sleep needs you have, we have the right technology for you. Like our MyPillow mattress topper, our queen size has over 10,000 individual comfort supports to help relieve your pressure points. And how about our 3-inch Hybrid Plus mattress topper? It's infused with copper and silver to help your body get the restorative sleep it needs. And our MyPillow and Case Coil mattresses, I personally helped develop these mattresses to make sure they have everything needed to give us great sleep. Plus, they're made right here in the USA, and they ship right to your front door absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get MyPillow mattresses and toppers for as low as $99.98 and free shipping.
Hi, it's Dr. Philip Appleton. You've been hearing my commercials about bye-bye pain, my laser weight treatment, but today's commercial and today's spot is going to be on Tom Laporta, Laporta Roofing. What an experience I've had with him and his company. They've done a few of my friends' houses and my son and my house, and there's never a downtime. They're old school, which means you call them up, they'll be there. How many times have you called somebody up and they never show up, or they give you an excuse, weather, traffic, whatever? Tom Laporta, what a class act. The workmanship, the magnificent teamwork they have. I recommend them 100%.
Thanks, Dr. Appleton. Now do what Dr. Appleton did. Pick up your phone and call Tom Laporta from Laporta Roofing on your cell phone. 954-604-4602. 954-604-4602. And online, LaportaRoofing.com. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm Brian. Thanks for tuning in. You're on the air. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Rosie from Tampa. How are you?
All right, Tampa. What's on your mind?
Thank you for playing that. I totally missed that speech. Oh, my God.
And it's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, you know, it really, to me, it spoke the hand of God. I mean, we looked at our past, and George W. Bush, he had done more than once calling for the New World Order to come in. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds heavy, but what Marco Rubio has just done is demonstrated that that's not what America wants. And I don't think most of people in their hearts want that. I pray a lot of hearts are softened by what we just heard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that come tomorrow, Monday, this isn't going to be the big story. You know, the Nancy Guthrie murder mystery case is going nowhere, and it's going to fade away from the news. And this should be the lead at the start of the week.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? For us, those of us who are listening actually are paying attention. We can actually share this speech and this story. I swear to you, I'm gonna do a Twitter space and put some clickbait in there just so I can play this for other people who will listen. Mm-hmm. Because that whole we live in Florida. We lose 84-year-olds every day. So, like, to really look at what's happening in America and where we stand on the global stage and how God has anointed these people to be in position in America. And the change it can have upon our entire world. Oh, yeah. And so I'll ask you the question. I mean, if you had to pick, who would you want to be the second MAGA president, JD or Marco? I would support either, but Marco just wows me. He has since he was senator here in Florida, and love him. Absolutely love him. I think most MAGA people think that way, including the president. And Marco, my God, I just, I already loved him before. But he never complains. He has the perfect stance. He is a diplomat. But those words, I want to know who helped him write that speech, if anyone at all. Yeah. That was absolutely maybe he just nailed it with his wife. Went and wrote it with his wife. You know what? That's probably true. Valentine's Day just yesterday. Mm-hmm. All right, appreciate the call. Take care. All right, now if you're on hold, hang in there. We'll take some more calls. I want to mention this today. Pam Bondi announced that she has released all the Epstein files. And by the way, not only did she release everything, she released a list of all the names in it, which are over 300. And I'm just going to tell you a couple things about this, okay? Remember what President Trump said when he signed the bill making it federal law to release all the files? He said nothing's going to satisfy these people. They're always going to claim something wasn't released. There are things that are what President Trump signed into law to release
were all the documents in possession of the federal government to release. That would be all the records in Congress, the Justice Department, or any agency of the federal government. Okay? So all the documents in the possession of the federal government have now been released, according to Pam Bondi and the president. Now, they're going to claim that things have not been released. No, Pam Bondi has released everything that she has access to, everything. Now, there are some judges that have had cases around the country that refuse to release things. And we see how partisan these judges are as of late. But President Trump has kept his campaign promise and has released everything. And I look through the list of the 300 names, and Trump is on that list. Melania is on that list. You know, JD Vance's name is on that list. Okay, so they didn't hold back. And the list of names, of course, means nothing. But President Trump, promises made, promises kept. Okay? And that's not going to satisfy people who want to hate on Trump and are obsessed on it. But I do want to share a couple things from a couple people. The first one's Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace. She's obsessing over this issue. Nancy Mace, this is in media. This isn't going away. Nancy Mace says, Nancy Mace goes off in scathing social media thread, rejects Pam Bondi's claim that all Epstein files have been released. There are still going to be people like Nancy Mace and Marjorie Trader Green and trolls that call me here on the program who are going to claim this and claim that. But President Trump, by making it federal law, every document in the possession of the federal government has now been released by the law that President Trump signed into law. All right? And that's it. Now, he can't make these federal judges or other judges, some of them are probably state judges too, I'm not sure, but he can't make these judges unseal things. Okay? And then not only do we have Nancy Mace, so of course Marjorie Trader Green, her new job is trashing Trump, and then she posted on X, all of you MAGA influencers and the rest mocking the seriousness of women who were trafficked and raped as teenagers and young women look like cult fools. Good luck trying to get women to vote for Republicans in the midterms, you insensitive clowns. The Republican Party already has a woman voting problem. Keep mocking those of us who take rape, and she says pedophilia seriously, and demand accountability for corruption. You know, what an absurd statement that she's made there. You know, I don't know how long Marjorie Taylor Greene has been this way. Was she ever on the side of President Trump? Was she ever with us? You really got to wonder, don't you, when she talks the way that she talks? Now, if you'd like to support my content, please become a Patreon supporter. There's a link to my Patreon page on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you get access to commercial-free editions of all of my podcast episodes. And I do exclusive live streams for Patreon supporters on the Patreon platform. It's a troll-free chat. You also get access to a lot of things my wife Kathy and I both post to Patreon for Patreon supporters only that no one else has access to. And if you're a top Patreon supporter, you get your name up on the screen here on YouTube, and you get a live thank you shout out on every episode of the program. So the names you'll hear now are my top Patreon supporters. I want to thank SF Jr., Christine, ETW, Chuck, Pamela, Nick, Wesley, Doris, Heather, David, Maria in Texas, Alice, Lee Zepp, Shauna, George, Brandon, John, Frank, Dale, Tina, David, Laura, Rob, Wes, Sue, Janice, Teresa, Irene, Doris, and Rick. These are my top Patreon supporters. Thank you all. Again, to become a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the description of this and every episode. And click that link and it'll walk you right through it. Okay, so Fetterman from Pennsylvania, he said his parents are Trump supporters, refuses to call MAGA voters Nazis. And Fetterman's been doing a lot of interviews about the SAVE Act, requiring state-issued photo ID in order to vote. Fetterman, you got to be careful with Fetterman. I know he makes a lot of sense and he says all the right things, but he's still a Democrat. He's not a Republican, and he's in a very Republican state. President Trump won Pennsylvania. So I like what he's saying. I agree with the things he's saying, but he's still a Democrat. I mean, if he, the way that he talks and everything, if he really believes it, he could switch parties and become a Republican, but he hasn't done that yet. So you always got to keep your eye and watch Fetterman. But the SAVE Act, we've got the 51 votes to pass it in the Senate with Susan Collins. And I want to talk about the SAVE Act just for a minute. The Democrats are going to filibuster it, and we got to get that 60-vote majority. But Thune, who's the Senate Majority Leader, could do away with the filibuster. He says he won't. It's very frustrating, And he says, well, we can't. If we throw out the filibuster, when the Democrats come back in, they'll do it. Well, they're going to do it anyway. Okay? They're going to do it anyway. What's the point of having the majority if you don't use it? This is, the SAVE Act is one of the most important bills that's ever gone through the United States Congress. It really is, requiring state-issued voter ID to vote. And the deal that President Trump made with Susan Collins is the citizenship requirement has been taken off the bill to get her vote. And she said, okay, I'll vote for it. And I know a lot of people, maybe some of you listening to my voice right now, say, well, it's useless without the citizenship requirement. No, it is not, okay? You can't get everything you want all at once. These things have to be done in stages. And the citizenship requirement, that would be something, if they kept the Senate, or if they kept the citizenship requirement to vote, the proof of citizenship, not the citizen. You do have to be a citizen to vote, okay? You sign a paper saying that you're a citizen eligible to vote. And if you sign that and you're not, you're breaking federal law and you can go to jail. But requiring proof of citizenship, if this bill were passed with that, it would be tied up in the courts for the next 100 years because everyone would have to go out and get a passport, and that's just not going to happen. It's a very difficult thing. That would be impossible. But the state-issued photo ID, which is a driver's license or a state-issued ID, which it looks like a driver's license. It's just not a driver's license, right? Some of you may have that. This is huge. It's huge. What that means is, and President Trump says that the state-issued photo ID will be in effect for the midterm elections. That means, like when I go and vote here in Florida, I have to show ID. Okay? They take my ID, they look at me, they look at the ID, they look at me, they look at the ID, then I have to sign, and they even check the signature to see if the signature matches. And what that does, state-issued photo ID, and you're saying, well, all these illegals, that means, and everything's done computerized now, right? So I go, and you guys know this because you've had to do the same thing. You go to vote, you go to your polling place, you give them your ID, they look at it, they put it in the computer, and they give you the ballot, you go vote. That means there's going to have to be a state-issued photo ID connected to every single ballot. Every single ballot will have to have a state-issued photo ID connected to it. That means no semi-trucks with fake ballots anymore. Okay? And that is a great victory to get that passed. And I'm listening to all of these pundits on television today, and they're like, well, all the polls show that even Democrats, over 70% of African Americans, over 80% of Latinos, over 70% of Democrats as a whole support voter ID. Why are the Democrats opposing what their constituents want? Because they know with state-issued photo ID required, they're going to be out of jobs for obvious reasons. I don't even have to tell you. The fact that the Democrats are going against their people to such an extent to stop not the citizenship proof, but stop the requirement of state-issued photo ID tells you that this is the exact same thing we need to get passed through. Now, a citizenship requirement, we can get that through next time, but that's not going to happen this time. So take the victory and understand what a great victory this is. Don't be a panicking. All right? Now, if you're new to the program, make sure you follow and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And also, please like the video. Those of you watching on YouTube, please like the video. Liking the video helps spread the word about the program. My name's Brian Craig. Thanks for tuning in. This is where MAGA comes to talk. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.